Recently, a story came out which you've probably already heard about. Browntown is a self-perceived ethno-equity victimhood-sensitive performative group from Christchurch. For a recent planned gig, they were trying to flog tickets at varying prices depending on what your ethnicity was. The group has a chip on its shoulder about white people and thinks that we should pay more because our whiteness makes us racist. Obviously, Browntown's position is simply projecting their own racism onto white people, and being younger folk, they still haven't matured out of leftism, remain under the misguided view that adults can't see through them. They'll grow up eventually, but for now I'll happily be the one that sets them on the path to adult reasoning. Well, there had to be some radicalised far-left reporter somewhere who would try to defend Browntown's indefensible racism. And who do they come from? In 3, 2, 1, yes, you guessed it, Radio New Zealand. Now, how those people are allowed to use the word New Zealand in their branding is beyond me. That alone should be a criminal offence. It turns out the whole justification for ethno-equity is systemic racism, and they had an expert opinion to back that up. Eureka, I thought. Finally, someone is going to explain why I should pay more because my skin has less melanin than a Maori person. Qualified, of course, by the exclusion of Debbie Nawera Packer. Even Anglo-Saxons aren't as white as our Celtic cousins. The expert, Yavashi Adav, is a senior consultant with business and economic research. In terms of wealth, she said this about income gaps.
The median weekly wage for Pākehā as of June 2024 was $1,352. For Maori it was $1,247, a gap of 8.4%. And for Pacific peoples $1,200, a gap of 12.7%.
Now what Yavashi or RNZ forgets to mention is that Asian people experience a greater pay gap than Maori people, and that the pay gap for Maori people is reducing. This is how the Inland Revenue summarises the pay gap situation without the inconvenient redactions made by Radio New Zealand.
Over the last year, pay gaps have been decreasing across all groups. Our analysis of ethnicity pay gaps show the following. Data from the 30th of July 2024. The average pay for men is higher than that for women across all ethnicities except European women. The current average ethnicity pay gaps are 13.4% for Pacific peoples, 15.9% for Asian, 8.45% for Middle Eastern, Latin American and African people, and 8.06% for Maori. The pay gaps are significantly higher for women, with a pay gap of 21% for Maori, 24% for Asian women, and 24% for Pacific women. Over the past 5 years, pay gaps have been decreasing across all groups except for Asian women, which has increased. This is likely due to an increased number of Asian new hires in frontline roles. As with gender, representation is the primary reason for Inland Revenue's ethnicity pay gaps. A large proportion of Maori, Pacific peoples, Asian and Latin people are in lower paid roles, and a smaller proportion are in higher paid roles. Within roles, like-for-like pay differences are minimal.
According to Yavashi, the perceived pay gap inequity is caused by systemic racism. So what I want to know is what part of the system is racist and how does it discriminate so that it causes a pay gap inequity? But Yavashi's not provided this crucial fact, so her claim cannot be validated. We don't know what's behind these statistics and what causes these pay gaps. If the causes of these pay gaps are the wage earner's choice of work, as IRD seems to infer in the case of Asians entering public service, or a limit arising from earlier choices about education, then the inequity is the cost of personal autonomy and should not be used as a justification for redistributing the wealth of others. Anyone who has watched Jordan Peterson's discourse on pay gaps will know that the existence of a gap does not automatically amount to the conclusion that there's a systemic bias. The real con job in the story, though, is not the unparticularised source of the alleged systemic racism that ostensibly causes pay gap inequity. It is instead the claim that inequity arises from something Yavashi is completely right and completely wrong about. This is what she says.
One of the most important determinants of wealth inequality are the intergenerational transfer of wealth, as accumulated wealth, such as property, flows from one generation to the next.
Yavashi is correct about property inheritance being a substantial proportion of intergenerational wealth. Yavashi, though, does not appear to understand the difference between the European hereditary system and the tikanga hereditary system. These are not the same by any means, and any Maori will tell you that in no uncertain terms. Ownership of property has been the substance of European investment and succession planning For centuries before 1840, Anglo-Saxons have had specific inheritance laws since their tribal period, not only for a select handful of wealthy leaders, but also property ownership and succession by ordinary wage-earning European people. By comparison, ordinary Maori people have never ever in their history owned property. The land that Maori people inhabited prior to 1840 was tribal land with communal owners. Tribal land cannot be bequeathed in the same way that European land titles can be. Even today, the situation remains that property transferred to the fractional descendants of pre-colonial natives is held in trust for their benefit by their relevant tribe. The alleged intergenerational wealth disparity overlooks that the fractional descendants of pre-colonial natives automatically pass their interest in their tribal property to their descendants simply by virtue of their bloodline. European inheritance is determined by the wishes of the testator. Maori inheritance is determined by ancestral bloodline. But for the statistics, both Maori and European wealth is measured on personal wealth rather than collective tribal wealth. It is therefore a misrepresentation to say that intergenerational wealth is disproportionately in favour of Europeans. The evaluation of the wealth of an ordinary Maori does not take into account the thousands of acres of land, the commercial interests, the business enterprises and investments of the tribe to whom the flat-broke ordinary Maori belongs. The total value of these tribal assets is tens of billions of dollars, and Maori people make up less than 18% of the population. Every Maori that dies in New Zealand leaves somewhere in the region of an extra $100,000 in tribal interests to their tamariki. Had that $100,000 of assets been bequeathed as personal property, the intergenerational wealth of two-part Maori parents accumulates about $200,000 to their personal estate. I'll put to one side the obvious objection that intergenerational seller's remorse over what someone's ancestors sold back in 1800 and something is not going to fly. It nevertheless remains a fact that behind every poor, uneducated, unhealthy Maori facing a prison term, there's a well-heeled tribal trust that collectively holds tens of billions of assets on behalf of these same blood stakeholders. The fact that these ordinary Maori cannot realise their assets will bequeath them is not because of the European system, it's because of tikanga, the Maori tribal ownership system. Therefore, the lack of intergenerational wealth, in particular property transfer of Maori people, is an illusion hiding behind a hidden network of multi-billion-dollar tribal trusts. The Radio New Zealand story has two alleged sources of inequity. The first is unable to be validated as being caused by systemic racism, and the second overlooks that Maori intergenerational wealth is not properly evaluated because it does not include ancestral tribal assets. So for the whole article, there are only two sources of inequity, and neither are valid. Without more, neither is a justification for me to pay extra because I have low-dose melanin. So sorry, Browntown, but you need to rethink your ethnic victimhood status. You're not victims. There is no inequity that is caused by systemic racism. The only inequity you face is the price of personal autonomy by virtue of being a New Zealander that has freedom of choice about your employment, and your lack of personal autonomy by virtue of being a member of a Maori tribe and subject to tikanga, which stops you receiving the inheritance you've been left. That's your fault, not mine. Now make your bed and get a job. Your victimhood claim is denied. I'll keep searching for the elusive expert who can tell me as a matter of fact whether systemic racism exists in our democratic system of government and how it operates to create an inequity for Maori people or the even less well-off post-1840 Polynesian colonists, or for that matter the Asian colonists who are at the pinnacle of the victimhood pay gap pyramid. The full story is linked in the description below. It's basically a lot of buzzwords and characterizations with the complete paucity of facts that I've come to expect from the left-wing propagandists at Radio New Zealand. It gets into a white guilt experiment and other manipulative tactics. What do you think? Do you believe the allegation that systemic racism is responsible for wealth inequity, or is it more likely that the pay gap is down to personal preferences about employment and education, and that the wealth of ordinary Maori people overlooks their ancestral stake in their substantial tribal assets? Let Browntown know what you think of their victimhood claim. Thanks for watching, give us a like would you, and don't forget to subscribe to be notified of new content as it drops. See you next time.